And we were just 5, but still other girls thought it was weird that I had a friend who was a boy. My daughter's 2.5 now, and I think she might be starting to get to that stage. She's in a Montessori school, so there's kids 2 to 6. So maybe she's picking this up from the bigger kids, I don't know. But she'll come home and she'll say with a whole lot of import, like she's just made one of the most significant discoveries of her life. She'll say, "Mama, you and Rose and me, we're girls. But Papa, he's a boy." Or she'll say, "I don't like boys, except for Papa. He's my favorite boy." So, when I was 5, there were some girls who didn't like boys, and they would tease me and this boy for being friends. His name was Josh. But still, Josh would come over to my house, and we would go out into the backyard and collect leaves, and we would build forts out of sticks. There was a tall oak tree in my backyard at the time, and it had a lot of acorns on it that we would collect. And one time when we were back there, a caterpillar fell down from the tree onto Josh's shirt. It was green, and it was really pretty. And so we put it in a jar so that we could have it as a pet. It ended up that he got to take it home. He convinced me that since it landed on his shirt, it was his. So I was a little bit sad about that. But home it went with him. And I would ask him about it to check in on it, see how it was doing. A couple days later at school, I asked him about the caterpillar, and he told me that, sadly, his mom made him let it go so that he could go outside and grow and have a good caterpillar life, as it should. It was sad for me, but probably good for the caterpillar. Fast forward 10 years. We were in high school. Josh's parents had been divorced for years. He had started to get into trouble. He'd been suspended from school many times. And one night, he stole his mom's car and crashed it into a tree. And he had to go to a juvenile correction center for a while after that. It wasn't long after that, when he returned from this experience, he was back in public school, that we ran into each other at a school dance. I was a little bit nervous to talk to him, knowing that he'd gotten into these kinds of trouble. But we started talking, and it still felt like we were friends. At the end of our short conversation that night, he asked me if I remembered the caterpillar. With gentleness in his eyes, he asked me if I thought it maybe was a butterfly now. I haven't seen him since. I don't know what he's up to. I don't know what his life has been since then. But I share that memory. Something about this little caterpillar spoke to him. In one of the letters that is part of our Bible, the letter to the Romans, it says that God's power and divinity can be understood through the things that God has made. The heart of Christian faith is resurrection. And images of resurrection are all around us. We have 2 of those that we're focusing on this morning. The first is the butterfly, like we have some people filling in the back. And we also have what we heard Pat read, a small seed, a grain of wheat being planted in the ground and growing up as a plant, something living, as we heard in our reading from John's Gospel. Both of these images offer little glimpses of resurrection. With each of them, with the caterpillar and the seed, we have something small that goes into the dark of a cocoon or of the soil. And then after a time, it emerges as something colorful and growing and vibrant. Neither of them is a complete metaphor for resurrection, but they have an echo of Jesus going into the tomb, dead, and emerging alive. Resurrection declares God's emergence from even the power of death. And it also points us to our own capacity to emerge too. Like a caterpillar or like a seed, we might experience our moments of darkness, but God calls us out. And we emerge more colorful, we emerge with more deepened life. Throughout this Lent, we've been talking about how Lent is a representation of Jesus' time in the desert, a time early in his ministry when he was tempted, uncertain about things, when you may have gotten disoriented. We talked about how in our lives too, each of these things, even though they don't feel like gifts or seem like gifts, things like disorientation and temptation and uncertainty, these things can offer us new perspective, can offer us opportunities to grow, can offer us clarity, can offer us hope. So we've talked about all of these gifts. And now we get to this final part of our story. We get to Jesus' last week of life when he is placed in a tomb that's closed off by a huge stone. But then on Easter morning, the women come, women including Salome, and they find that this stone is rolled away, that Jesus has emerged. And so the Easter story brings us one more gift to add to the others, and that is the gift of emergence. In the Easter story, there is an invitation to us to receive this gift of emergence. There's a chance to remember that our faith in the risen Christ means that any experience we have, whatever it might be, has the potential for us to emerge from it more colorful, more alive, more ready to live well and to love fully. Faith in the risen Christ means that any experience can grow us in this capacity, can help us emerge more colorful and more alive and more able to live well and to love fully. What does emergence look like? I think of a guy called Joe who I met once in the hospital. He was in his 30s, but he had to receive a new kidney. Hadn't had the easiest life, type 1 diabetes since he was young. He made some mistakes too. He hadn't always taken care of himself the way that he probably should have. But still, this gift, a kidney, a new one. He told me that he felt different after the surgery. He told me he felt like the girl he didn't know who had given him the kidney. Like somehow she had changed him, even though he would never meet her. Some part of her kindness was inside of him now. And so he felt like he could say goodbye to his past, to his mistakes, and he could move forward into the future. He had new hope, new life. That's emergence. Or I think of Carla, a 50-something-year-old seminary student. She shared that when she was a little girl, one of her uncles had caught her one evening disappearing to read after dinner. He laughed at her. He said, "Look at you. You think you'll be somebody. Black girls are lucky if they get through high school." And now here she was, about to graduate from Princeton Seminary. She had carried that pain, had carried the obstacle of being told by all kinds of people, even this man in her own family, that she wouldn't amount to anything. She carried all of that with her. And now she was letting it go. She was emerging as the self that she had always been, the self that God had made her to be from the time she was created. And she was living into it in a way that people hadn't thought possible. That's emergence. Or I think of Jill, a mentor who shared in a blog post recently that when she was a teenager, the owner of a restaurant where she worked had sexually abused her one night after the customers had gone home. She quit immediately without telling her family or friends why. She kept wondering what she'd done to bring it on. But as time went on, as she grew and was cared for by others, she found herself really starting to believe that she is a child of God, and that God didn't want that to happen to her, that God didn't blame her for it. And as time went on, she found that other girls and women started to come to her to talk. She realized that she could help them also find healing. That's emergence. Because where there is a cocoon, there is a butterfly waiting to fly out. Where a seed gets buried deep in the soil, there is a stalk of wheat waiting to grow up. Where there's a tomb, there is a woman who comes carrying her spices, looking for a body, but discovering that the stone has been rolled away. The one she is looking for is not there. He's risen. Our faith in this risen Christ means that any experience we have, however horrible or painful or wrong, any experience has the potential for us to emerge from it more colorful and more alive and more ready to live well and to love fully. Because not even the worst death could stop Christ from rising. And so I ask you this morning, what is the next step for you in your own emerging? Is there a cocoon that God is asking you to shed? Old negative words that someone said to you that it is time to let go of? A situation that you long to bring to God to heal? Think about the next step toward your own emergence. One thing you can do today or tomorrow or this week, and do it. Do it in faith that our God is a God of resurrection, a God who can't be kept in the tomb, a God who steps out into the light and brings every disciple along for the journey. That includes you, that includes me, that includes my friend Josh. Resurrection is at the heart of our faith. Let's live like it. Let's hear the call to emerge, knowing that our risen Christ walks with us every step of the way. Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Thanks be to God. We know all are welcome here who desire you and to live at peace with one another, all are welcome at this table. And so we turn to you, asking forgiveness for the ways that we haven't loved or lived in peace. We join together in our prayer of confession.
Please join me. For turning away from you too quickly.
Forgive and restore us, O God.
For focusing too long on the tomb.
Forgive and restore us, O God.
For subduing our light, for subduing our celebration, for subduing our faith in the power of your love.
Forgive and restore us, O God.
Hear these words of assurance. God has turned to us. God bids us away from the darkness. God calls us to shine, to celebrate, and to believe. Love lives. Christ is risen.